Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. And we have a very distinguished panel to discuss a very, very important topic. As we all know, India has over 85% small and marginal farmers. And one of the core, unlocks to being able to build scale in the agriculture economy is our farmer producer organizations. And while we have over 40,000, registered FPOs, I think the current scenario is that, many of them need significant institutional strengthening. And I think what we're here to discuss today is to what extent, data and technology can play a role to bridge many of the gaps, that we see in the FPOs. And each of our panelists has, very direct and differentiated experience, not just working with FPOs, but also with many other parts of the ecosystem, whether it is credit institutions or whether it is, market-facing institutions. And so the context today will be to really talk about, what we can do to strengthen access to technology and information for FPOs. Before we do that, maybe I can get started with just a very quick 2 minutes of context, which is when we look across the agriculture, value chain. When we look across the agriculture, value chain, there are, many areas where there are significant gaps, whether it is, even information, let's say, prior to sowing in terms of, what the market demand and the price is, or whether it is the right package of practices and advisories that farmers would need to be able to make timely decisions. And especially in the context of climate change, I think many of us know that these decisions, need to be made quite differently than they were and with a lot more volatility. And I think then comes, the discussion around, when to harvest, whether to sell, whether to store. And at each step in this value chain, there is, the requirement for, data information as well as technology to facilitate, the right decision, whether it could be access to post-harvest processing, infrastructure or warehousing capacity. And, within this context, maybe Dr. Sood, I will really start with you. I've heard that, market linkage and price discovery is perhaps one of the biggest challenges today. Can you tell me a little bit more about, the role that NABARD is playing as a system orchestrator to bring, this kind of information and technology to the farmer today?
So good afternoon, friends. So after lunch, it is really very difficult to hold back people. In fact, some of our people were going in 6 o'clock flight. So that is why we have preponed this session, so that our distinguished guests who have come from outside, so they will have some crowd. And then we feel encouraged actually when people are there around. So as she has mentioned, that price is very, very important. And particularly from the farmers' context, if you compare farmers with some non-farmers or say industrialists, so industrialists have got some control over the fixation of the prices. But farmers are price takers only. And most of the time we feel that they are on the negative side of the price taking. So they always have issues in terms of the price. So therefore, this issue is very central to our organization, because we are working for rural areas for fixing the problem. And we have taken, apart from the government of India, we have taken some issues, some initiatives in terms of resolving this issue. As far as the digital market linkage is there, of the around 7,400 FPOs that we have formed in the country, around 1,700 FPOs we have linked with ONDC and maybe with ENAM also. And but then the initiative does not end at that stage. Linking is one part of it. Then there is an entire process behind that. Preparing catalogs, going through the entire process, and then there are so many other formalities that are there on the ONDC, so as to help them. Then the quality issues are there, value chain issues are there. So the entire things are being taken care of, some standardized processes So if the FPOs are also made part of the ENAM process, and then the issues which are there affecting the cross-state trade, they are taken care of, then I think this will be a very good step, and we would like to be part of this initiative through FPOs and cooperatives and try to help them in whatever way it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sood. I think it's, like you said, great to see that the thinking is not just, in terms of, more expanding local market access, which I think NABARD has been doing for a long time, but it's not, it's international markets, it's newer kind of mechanisms for, price stabilization, like you're saying, through forums like NCDEX. So it's really, really good to see this. I think we've price discovery and market linkage is one major area, but I think the other, especially for FPOs, is access to capital. And I think while the government has put in place, mechanisms for long-term capital formation, for example, the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, NABARD has the NAB Sanrakshan guarantee also underpinning that. One of the big areas that both FPOs as well as farmers really struggle is working capital. I've seen, in market, a few products that are using, data and alternate data pipelines, whether it's geospatial data or transaction data, or hopefully over time, more soil health kind of data as well, which are building, innovation for financial access. Dr. Arrawatia, you do a lot of work in the space. Want to get your sense of, what's happening from a credit provision point of view, and how are the financial institutions responding, not responding, what support might they need as well to be able to make some of this possible?
So before going to this question, I would just want to, compliment NABARD for bringing this scheme where they are asking the FPOs and the cooperatives to take the options on the exchange. I believe that this is an amazing initiative. I run a center at IRMA called as Center of Excellence on Commodity Markets. And we have been closely following this particular options pricing scheme which has been provided to the farmer. I believe this is an amazing scheme because what it does is it takes away the downside of the risk of a farmer and ensures that the upside remains, which means it is technically acting like a market-based MSP. And I believe that if it is something which is taken up and understood by the farmers, in the long run, it can take care of a lot of problems that we from the policy perspective are facing. And if the FPOs and farmers start taking position, especially on the options, it is something which can benefit the farmers in a very big a lot of organizations are coming up with the use of technology for providing credit to the farmers. Now, one of the major problems that we see in excess of credit to farmers and farmer organization is how do you build the history of their data. For example, if you want to give a loan to an individual, you will have the CIBIL score, you will have the history of their bank account and a lot of other such things for giving loans. Now, with the use of technology, I believe with Sahkar Sarthi coming up and with enterprises who are basically tracking the history of the cooperatives, FPOs, and the other collective forms, I believe it becomes easier for the banking system to give loans to the FPOs. And I see a lot of risk mitigation which happens through other technologies which are coming up. So, for example, the participation of the farmers and the FPOs on various platforms for trading, various platforms for selling their produce, collectivization or cooperation amongst cooperative, which is helping the risk being mitigated and transferred to certain form of cooperatives. It is leading to a better way by which the farmer, the FPOs and the cooperatives are able to provide data which allows them to access credit from the markets. And there are startups which are coming up, which are bringing in newer technologies. So we're just talking to one startup a few minutes back where the KCC loans could be given seamlessly to the farmers through this particular startup. The name of the startup is What's Loan, which basically helps startups, FPOs, and cooperatives to basically get the KCC loan seamlessly for the farmer. And a lot of other such technologies are coming up which would help the farmers, FPOs, and other collective forms to basically get loans seamlessly. So,
Just a follow up to that, are you seeing, I mean, we're seeing a lot of fintechs maybe responding, maybe NBFCs. Are you seeing traditional financial institutions also responding in as agile a way, or is there something more that we can do?
I believe that the fintechs and the new technology, new innovations that are coming up will force the traditional organizations to also adopt them. In the long run, there is no option for the traditional banks and other forms of NBFCs to adopt the technologies which are brought by the fintechs. And I think that is already happening. I think RBI Innovation Hub has brought in some of the technologies on the RBI Innovation Hub platform, which is now available to the scheduled commercial banks, the cooperative banks, and other NBFCs as well.
And I think, like you said, Sahkari will accelerate that adoption as well. Great, thank you so much. Mr. Tiwari, I'll come to you. You've had many avatars, I think, and in your latest one, you work very closely, at the last mile through your foundation as well. And I would really like to, understand, we've talked about FPOs getting onto ONDC. We've talked about them, using new platforms for, let's say, options, pricing and hedging. We've talked about, this financial access, providing your data in a, consent-driven manner to be able to get loans. That seems like a lot of, capability and capacity that we need to build even institutionally within the FPOs and the farmers. So could you say a little bit more about what kinds of capacities the system, needs to build? And there are many stakeholders in this ecosystem available to support that journey. What role can some of them play?
See, there are two things. The FPO model, we are facing the same problem which SHGs had suffered or cooperatives had suffered. That once they are formed, we presume that they will keep working like ideal case situation. We are running few FPOs in different names. And one is the, say, farmers, genuine farmers, and who were aggregating the product and selling. Or not selling, actually. We were telling them to aggregate, motivating them, but they were not willing to do anything. When we went deeper, it turned out that if his members are wasting spending 1 day of their time, and the travel, etc., going to the market has a lot of cost, who is going to pay for that? And this was a very genuine problem. So we decided that, okay, every day spent for the FPO, the directors will be getting 500 rupees. Now they're happily doing, they're involved. Now, unfortunately, we registered this under Companies Act. Now, Companies Act is, the compliance cost is, and the chances of committing mistakes are enormous. So we are now putting a company secretary from our side to see that the documentation says everything is proper. Another thing is that we talk about market access and the bankers not giving the loan. I worked as a banker also in my one more earlier avatar. See, as a banker, I will never touch the FPO because there is information asymmetry. I don't know about the FPO. FPO comes for a loan, they will tell, okay, government guidelines are there, but I have to do my due diligence. I am responsible as a banker for recovery of the money. Now, what happened during SHG days? When it was being piloted by Indian Bank, Gopal Krishnan, who was CMD of the bank, he created a checklist, point-wise scoring system. If your SHG has got this much score, his banks will be giving the loan, even amount, etc. Then Mr. Kotaya of NABARD took the same thing, and NABARD also created the same model, and SHGs are getting the loan. Now, if where all these things are available. Now, data also, we talk there is data, farmers need information. But if you look at the information, number one, that where they require information, that data is not available. Second, if it is available, it is multiple sources are there from which he has to get. When he gets the data, he is unable to interpret. Now, I'll give classic case of soil health cards. It is like your pathology report. What are you going to do with that? When I was in a fertilizer company, we told our people, okay, can you put all the recommendations of the local agriculture university and give if farmer tells he has so much land, he wants to do, groundnut, then you give him 3 options. One is our product, what is the price? Based on his, and the soil health card is also, the data is segregated at plenty of places. Luckily, we had around 20-30 lakh soil health card data.
Sure.
Based on that, we'll recommend them that this is our cost, you require only this much.
Yeah.
This is my competitor's cost, this much. This is another competitor's cost, this much. All the 3 are available, you decide. And we used to give him printout, he will go and take his decision. Now, interpretation is the biggest problem for the farmer. You look at, IMD website is available for weather. But ask any farmer, will he be able to take a call based on IMD website data?
Yeah. But this is a very important point that you're making, and which is that, I think one is availability of data. The second is the access to data. But the third is really, the capability and capacity to be able to interpret and act on that, right? And I think when you talk about acting on it, even the network needs to be available. And I'll come back to you in a moment, but the reason I pause you is exactly the example that you shared is I want to bring in Sandeep, who's the founder of Krishitantra, and you said soil health, and that's really, I think, what Sandeep is trying to simplify. So Sandeep, I think, just building on what Mr. Tiwari said, tell us a little bit about, your organization and what you're doing to be able to not just help farmers access perhaps one of the most critical pieces of data, which is information about their soil health, but also interpret and act on it. And I think in that context, tell me a little bit about, how you're partnering with others in the ecosystem to be able to close this loop. And then maybe Tiwari ji, I'll come back to you a little bit later again to build on that.
Sure. Thanks, Aparna. So what Krishitantra is doing is today to simplify not only the access of information on the soil health, but also to interpret that in a meaningful way, and also to make that access very easily available. So how we are doing it, one, we have developed a technology which does a rapid estimation on the soil testing without compromising on the lab level accuracy. So we have automated the whole journey of soil testing, which a lab chemist would typically take many hours to do. It is the same thing which an unskilled person can be able to do it because of the help of automation. So anyone who is having a very basic level of education will be able to operate that. So the reason we did that is because we have to take this kind of technology at a grassroots level, which is near to the farmer, and finding chemist over there or a skilled labor would be a difficult task. So that is the first challenge or a problem statement that we have solved. And the second thing is we have got that information to the cloud, and we have digitized the scientific information. Let's say, as Dr. Tiwari mentioned just now, that interpretation of pathogen, it is just a pathogen kind of report which is there, a pathology report which is there. So to interpret that into a meaningful way to a farmer is nothing but a fertilizer recommendation and advisory, depending on the crop they choose, so they can interpret it. So this is what we have digitized this whole journey, and the same thing we have, we have made it as a digital platform even for Government of India. The entire soil health card platform which is there, we developed that, and that is being managed by us. So this is in nutshell what Krishitantra is all about. Now the partnership is something to do with, now it's not only important for a farmer to have this access to information. So there is many other players in the value chain who are not accessing this information and which could be very useful for them. One thing in the context of the fintech part of it is, if I give an analogy, so a pathology lab of a human is required for providing even insurance and also a health the health insurance sort of thing, because that is something which will provide you a trend or an idea what kind of risk a financial institution is undertaking. So it is underwriting in general terms what they say. So that is not considered in the soil health. So we have developed a platform where it is where a farmland can be converted into a soil score depending on the kind of parameters that we are addressing. So it will provide a scoring saying that how healthy this soil is and what kind of risk anyone would be taking. It could be a farmer, it could be a financial institution, it could be a supply chain company who are relying to procure the produce, and also for a fertilizer organization or an input organization, that what kind of thing is required there. So that is a sort of thing that so far what we have developed and trying to cross integrate among the value chain.
Thank you. I think that's really great to hear. Dr. Sood, maybe I'll come back to you. You know, we've had such a rich conversation so far, and I think many themes, like we discussed, picked up. But I think at the heart of it is the need for an orchestrator, to play the role to bring a lot of this data and information together. Government of India, of course, is, building the agri stack, and I think the focus right now is 3 foundational registries of farm, farmer, and crop. But I think beyond that, there is a lot more, information that is required. And I would, I think NABARD plays a very key role as an, orchestrator in this ecosystem. You work with the banks and the financiers. You actually fund many startups that are creating, point solutions that can provide access to data. You, of course, have the development network and FPO information given your roles. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways in which this data could be brought together and anything maybe that you're already doing?
Yes, some form of data is available. We have a platform called FPO, where information about the FPO's functioning on about 300 parameters is available. And it is available across the country. Now, what we are trying to do is that this information is little static. So we are trying to make it more dynamic. And we are coming out with a new platform for capturing more dynamic information so that it is more relevant, it is more live. Now the need of the hour is that this information, if it is not used by the players in the ecosystem, then it's not of much use. So the need is that we have to bring all players together on a particular platform. And this information has to be provided to the people in a way that it is usable to them. For example, to the banks, how can the banks take this information to extend credit facilities to the people? And maybe for government also. There are a lot of government schemes. For example, in some states I have seen that, just to name one scheme, custom hiring centers. So in some states, they have created schemes where these schemes are given only to the FPOs. So maybe if the governments can also use for taking their schemes to the FPOs. So basically, we have to provide an interface where these things are taken to them. Then another aspect is market linkage. So where we have done we are also running certain FPO accelerator programs. One is in Karnataka and one is in Maharashtra. So there are issues, and there are also a lot of data is being captured while we are getting the farmers to connect to the market players. So a lot of data is being captured. That will also be on these platforms. So through this market data, so bankers will also be comfortable. And what is happening, I'll just narrate the experience of Karnataka. It is not only market linkage, it's leading to certain other things. It is leading to diversification also. And the data that is being generated through this, that we are going to onboard on this platform and try to make it more usable.
That's really, I mean, I think two things that you said that really, I think, resonate with me. I think one is your, the role around stitching the value chain together and how you bring many of these players. But I think also how does it then, some of this get built as institutional capacity in the FPOs, and really great to hear about the FPO Accelerator program. One more thing that I will say is we've not talked about Gen AI. I think this is a technology conference, and I think in many of the ways that you all are talking about making data available, interpretable, accessible at the last mile, I think, really a lot of the innovation of Gen AI as well as agentic AI, whether it is scheme information, whether it is, decision support, I think that could be a huge force multiplier. I think we have some time for audience questions before we do, one or two more questions for the panel from me. But are there any questions from anyone in the audience for our panelists? We can pass some mics around. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I'm still looking for hands though. If we don't, then I think we'll continue our conversation. Okay, great. I think, yeah, we'll, think about your questions. If anything, I can still save a few minutes.
Ask only easy questions.
Dr. Arrawatia, I think, given the discussion that we've been having, I think you represent an institution that I think has a very long legacy of, enabling and supporting, grassroots talent also, coming in to lead many of these kind of cooperatives and FPOs, right? So, could you give us any thoughts that you may have on how we can build more institutional capacity, how we can kind of ready, the future leaders to be able to overcome some of the challenges that we've talked about that FPOs and farmers might face in adopting digital technologies?
Okay, so one thing, so, the government has recently formed this university called as Tribhuvan Sahkari University. Now, I would just want, to speak about the reason why this has been done. We see Amul, which has become a, organization with a turnover of 90,000 crores. And one of the reasons why Amul has been able to do so well is because IRMA has been able to provide professional manpower to Amul for the last 40 years. And if you look at the leadership in the milk cooperatives, you'll see at the top, there's someone from IRMA sitting there. The point I'm trying to make is that if you want to make FPOs, cooperatives scale up, if you want them to grow large, you will need professional manpower, and you need institutions which can support them. And that is where I believe this initiative of Tribhuvan Sahkari University is very, very important. It will actually help, build up the cooperative sector, which is going to support the people at the ground level. I have another role at IRMA, which is I head the incubator there, which is IRMA ICT Foundation. I would just want to add one more thing here. I'm just going a little. There is the startup ecosystem which have been built up in the country over the last n number of years. And I believe that, we have been able to support a large number of startups. Agri-techs have been supported by NABARD and other organization, impact funds and a lot of other organizations. And there is some, problem which is being seen at this point in time. There is some, funds are suddenly vanishing in this particular domain. And there is some apprehension. Now, I would want to make a statement which might not look very good, but I would say that let's not fund startups. Let's fund their interventions. Okay, so what I mean by that is, instead of giving something to a startup, say for example, Krishitantra, rather than giving him money for funding in form of equity, what we can do is we say that, okay, how many farmers can you work with? Okay, how many farmers can you help in increasing their productivity? And we fund the intervention. Okay, in the process, we can take equity. In the process, we can give him debt. In the process, we can actually create a impact fund. Okay, but the idea would be to basically fund the intervention which actually supports the farmer, the FPO, the cooperative. And if you are able to do that, I believe that it will have a huge impact. And it will actually take away the problem that we are seeing, that many of the enterprises, they take money as equity with a potential, with a promise, with an idea, with a scale, but ultimately it might not be reaching where it should. So when you clearly say that we'll be funding an intervention, it changes the whole context of the thing. So that I believe can actually be very helpful. And I'm saying it here because NABARD runs the AgriShore Fund. They actually support a lot of startups. And this is one way by which it can be done. And I would be happy to, maybe if you would want to do an experiment at Tribhuvan Sahkari Institute, would be willing to do that as well. Thank you.
I think that's a very interesting idea, and I think there are many decision makers in the room who could actually take some of that forward. And I think if I just, for a second build on what you're saying, what often happens when we try to deploy a lot of, technology solutions, at least in this context in the field, is that what we've talked about, right, the missing middle of the other value chain actors often don't, necessarily have the capacity or the funds to come to the table, whether it's the non-profit ecosystem who's there to hold the farmer's hand, as they go through the early stages of adoption, or whether it is, some of the other market participants. So maybe this idea of, I'm not going to comment on funding startups or not, but maybe this idea of funding interventions and creating an intervention pilot fund is something that could be considered. Great. I know that we're, almost at time, so maybe I can, ask one last set of questions, and I'll start, maybe Sandeep, I think with you, which is that, as you look at the next, 10 years, how do you see really the FPO, as an institution, and, what are some of the big unlocks that we actually need, given this conversation, to be able to make them stronger, more resilient, and tech-led?
Yeah. So before answering your question, I just want to mention this, because since I'm one of the startup here. So firstly, I'm very thankful to NABARD, NAB Ventures, for funding Krishitantra, because I think there is a huge gap. I mean, yeah, I agree to a certain extent for the interventions has to be funded once the tech is ready. But I agree, tech is still very far away from seeing the daylight in the tech segment when it comes to the context of Indian agri scenario, which is there. So I think still the funding which is happening at the research and innovation level is still minuscule. And I think there should be a lot of thing, and very thankful to VCs like NAB Ventures, who are actually doing the funding for the agri-techs in real term. So coming back to the point on the FPO part, which is there. So I think the data unlock will happen with adoption. By not only by the farmer, but across the entire value chain, across each and every services that are being provided. I think not only on the soil health, I would say, overall, it may be related to the agronomy, because the research has been so far limited only to a research institution level. We are talking about ICAR, we are talking about universities. So the technologies have been developed, but it has never reached the ground. So these things will have to be adopted. Unless these things are not adopted, the value chain will never be able to unlock the potential, the actual potential which is required, and the whole burden cannot be on the farmer to have or access of this particular information that, they are the only not the stakeholder who will have to pay for that or use that, but it has to be shared by across, and the value exists for each and everyone. Yeah.
Great. I think that's the right point for me to maybe ask Mr. Tiwari, any final thoughts on this point, that it's not just the farmer that has to, I think, face the burden, let me say, or the cost of adoption, but the role of many other stakeholders is important. Any final thoughts on what that could look like?
I think FPO is the, I would say, customer of that product which we are making. So FPO need not bear this thing other than his user charges, etc. That is all. But your question was, can I take his question of where you'll see FPO after 10 years? See, when SHG movement started, NABARD was the champion, and very, very active champion at that time. It was Mr. Kotaya's passion that. See, today we are not finding any institutional champion for FPO who will move around and pester every. There was a CSR, the Gujarat CSR authority, And 3-year mandate was there for that also in the earlier. We requested the secretary MCA that look, we are the government, हमको कौन सा 3 साल की जरूरत है? बोले रिमूव कर दे, हमने बोला नहीं हमारा 1 साल हो गया, 1 साल कर दीजिए. So we'll be eligible to take the money and route it this thing. So it is not that government is this thing, but FPOs will not. There are so many things are to be tied up. We require institutional champion who will keep pestering every department everywhere, following it up and getting things done.
Wonderful. I think with that, maybe just last question. One takeaway from today's conversation that might have stayed with you. And I'm happy, I'd like to hear that from each of you, but I can share mine first maybe. And I think that continues to be this participation across all stakeholders in the value chain and who that anchor orchestrator is and how we kind of make that happen. The layer that I'm really enjoying is, funding collectively all of these market participants. So that's my one takeaway. If anybody else would like to share their one takeaway from today, that would be great, and then we'll wrap up.
So I think on the pattern of cooperative, there is also a need for, like we had Sahkar Sarthi. So we need FPO Sarthi also, because there are many, it's not only credit, there are non-credit challenges that the FPO is facing, compliance and so many other markets, so many things are there. So I think to provide them common services, we need to have some kind of shared service. So maybe we can call it whatever name it is there. But there is a need for providing some common services. So without which these organizations, maybe some of them may graduate to up to some level, but without right hand holding, many of them will be thereby. So I think the institutional support or the champions that he was telling, so definitely there is a need for that.
Thank you. That's a brilliant thought. Any last comments from anybody else on the panel?
So I think the key takeaway for me would be that, it's the conventional way of agriculture, irrespective of the number of years we are going to talk, maybe 10 years, 20 years, 100 years from now, will not change unless there is a data and a governance coming together into the agri scenario. And I think FPO would be a key player in that, in unlocking.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to our brilliant panelists. Could we have a round of applause from everybody, please?